Right, let's go back to our lead story. Israel has recalled its ambassador to South Africa, Eliav Belotsercovsky, reportedly for consultations following what the country considers hostile statements from South Africa. A National Assembly motion this afternoon calling for the Israeli embassy in South Africa to close is still going ahead. Let's get some analysis on this. We're joined by Lerato Tsebe, who is a research assistant at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. Lerato, a good afternoon to you. Thank you so much. Good morning, rather. Thank you so much for joining us. Give me your initial thoughts when you first heard the story. I'm keen just to hear, what your first thoughts were when you heard the news. Israel recalls its SA ambassador.
Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners. I'm not really surprised that this has transpired. To be very honest, I'm actually wondering what took so long for the Israeli ambassador to be recalled, had he not been essentially expelled from the country. I think relations between South Africa and Israel have been extremely tense, not just within the context of this past month, but within the past few years. You must remember we previously downgraded our embassy in Israel, and now last week, I believe it was, we recalled our entire diplomatic staff contingent from there. I think that we are not finding common ground in terms of politically what it is that each individual country values and where they're finding complementarity in those political values, if these two countries do share that. I think that South Africa has historically been pro-Palestinian in its posturing in the Middle East and has been very consistent in adopting that and moving that forward. And I think the past month has heightened the country's support for the state of Palestine and the Palestinian people. The actions on behalf of the Israeli government have only increased the antagonism and created a broader chasm in the lack of political complementarity between the two countries and places where they feel they can engage and meet. So this is, for me, really no surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You say it's no surprise. And, earlier we spoke to the Jewish Board of Deputies and the sentiment was that this took place as a result of hostility, South Africa's hostility towards Israel. Is that the sense that you're getting, that South Africa is being hostile towards the Jewish state? And really, I mean, at what point does South Africa hit decisiveness without that view then being seen that way, that the country's being hostile towards Israel?
Well, I think we need to get a bit more clarity for them when they say that, when we say we're being hostile. Well, what is their definition? In which way are we being hostile towards them? Because we're calling out the catastrophe or the massacre of Palestinian children in Palestine, or because we've referred the matter in Gaza to the International Criminal Court. I think the diplomatic posturing that Pretoria has adopted in the matter and the Palestinian matter has been very much in line with international law. And I think that the actions of the Israeli government over the past few weeks have been firmly outside of the confines of international and convention. And furthermore, it is not just us as South Africa that have recalled an Israeli ambassador. Plenty of countries in the Middle East. I believe Spain is one of the countries that's also considering removing the Israeli ambassador. Nordic countries, whom are historically, I think, exercise a great deal of soft power in wanting to negotiate tensions and hostilities between two differing states, have come out rightly and are outraged with what has happened in Palestine over the past 4 weeks. So when they're saying that what we're being hostile towards them, what is the nature of the hostility is the inquiry, the question that I have to pose towards the Israeli government.
You're with the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. What's the sense that you get about how the continent is responding to this war between Israel and Hamas?
It's been very interesting, some of the responsiveness from our African counterparts. I think in the first week of the Israeli incursion into Gaza, the African Union came out very strongly in support of the Palestinian people. But in no way in Addis Ababa has the Israeli observer mission been recalled or had their seat removed from there. We've seen a number of protests and statements from smaller NGOs, but nothing of the gravity of protests that we've seen here in South Africa, specifically in support of the Palestinian cause. I think have to remember that the nature of the relationship that Israel has bilaterally with other African Union member states is very distinct from the one that we have in South Africa, which is that their relationship with other African states focuses bilaterally more so reliant on defense. And these are also in areas or regions on the continent where these countries are conflict prone. So we have a very different nature of relationship with the Israeli government here as our African counterparts do elsewhere. I think people have exercised a great deal of agency. We've seen more people, more countries like Kenya that have come outrightly in support. Meanwhile, the Kenyan population has come and countered their government and say that they do not support these gross crimes against humanity that the Israeli government is committing in Gaza. Whereas here in South Africa, I think that the South African public has very much been in tandem with the government's positioning and posturing on the situation in Palestine.
Yeah, let's look at what we're expecting to see this afternoon, right? BRICS member states meeting this afternoon for this extraordinary summit, right? And that's Brazil, Russia, India, China. But it's not just, and of course South Africa chairing the bloc, but it's not just those 5 states. You've got the member states that will officially be joining BRICS in 2024. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, the UAE, also taking part in these discussions. Ethiopia as well, taking part in these discussions this afternoon. I mean, what are you expecting to come out of those deliberations? I know that many expectations about what we might hear even from Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, or President Vladimir Putin, for instance.
Well, I think, the Palestinian cause is well advocated for within the BRICS grouping and the BRICS Plus grouping, rather, as it stands. Very strong advocates of the Palestinian cause in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, with Russia, Brazil, China. The one outstanding country that's not been strongly supportive of the Palestinian cause being India, being the only people at the table that whose political stature has been very much in support of the Israeli government. I think we're going to start hearing more of other member states of BRICS wanting far more action on behalf of the United Nations in really causing not just for a humanitarian ceasefire, but to also really start articulating how to start mobilizing this two-state solution. Yeah. It's been on the table for decades now. And I think the actions on behalf of the Israeli state in the past month have really put the cause the cause for the two-state solution to really start unveiling itself. Yeah. And there are many countries, not just within the BRICS grouping, but broadly within the United Nations, whom are now really wanting to see a far more astute degree of commitment to wanting to see this transpire. I think for the most part, BRICS member states are going to continue to be in firm solidarity of the Palestinian cause and wanting to see aid coming through and flowing through the Rafah border, and for Palestinian children to start receiving more. I'm not expecting to see a large difference or a shift in posturing from the majority of the BRICS Plus member states in their continued support of the state of Palestine. I'm not seeing anybody wanting to move away from wanting more humanitarian aid to access the border. I think we will hear more of that, but we want that.
Yeah, and I'm going to squeeze just one last question in here. We know that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will also be attending this BRICS Plus summit virtually this afternoon, and one wonders what then he says. I mean, when we saw him at the actual BRICS summit in August, one of the things that he spoke about was this era of multipolarity on the globe that we sit with, and one wonders if we get in there and South Africa continues with its stance of the referral to the ICC, for instance, is there a way for the UN Secretary General to hit a good balancing act?
Look, I think the fact that the BRICS Plus members have invited the SG to come to this meeting is welcome. It to elongate their own, their own commitment, rather, to multilateralism. and to them wanting to be committed to the ideals for which the United Nations stands for. I think that the Secretary General has found BRICS member states and the posturing that we've assumed in supporting the state of Palestine, something that he feels he also stands firmly in solidarity with. More so the urgency of wanting to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. I think furthermore, the Secretary General perhaps welcomes South Africa's stance in referring the matter to the ICC and wants to get far more support within the United Nations from BRICS plus member states to advocate for a far more, a greater entry of aid into Palestine, and furthermore to get more support about how to start mobilizing the two-state solution between Israel and Palestine.
Yeah. All right. We're going to leave it there, Lerato, and we really do appreciate your input, giving us a lot to think about, obviously, as we get closer to seeing that extraordinary sitting of BRICS Plus, and of course, even the vote within the National Assembly on whether or not, with that motion put forward by the EFF, but whether or not members of Parliament will be voting for the shutting down of the Israeli embassy. Big geopolitical shifts are happening there. We appreciate your time. Lerato Tsebe is a research assistant at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg. We're going to keep analyzing this big story for the day, Israel having withdrawn its ambassador to South Africa. On the other side of this, stay with us.